Hello and welcome to today's show. This is Yanni again. I'm so grateful to have you with me. And today we're going to talk about the shadow government in your cookie jar. Now, Yanni, what do you mean by that? The shadow government in your cookie jar. Now, let me explain. Many years ago, I listened to a very wealthy businessman, and he said we're supposed to pay all our taxes and everything that belongs to the government. However, the government should never be allowed in your cookie jar. In other words, what's in your cookie jar, what is yours, and the government does not have to have or should not have their fingers in your cookie jar. In other words, what's yours is yours, and the government shouldn't have any say over that. And that's very important. And I know it's not always so easy because we think government is so strong and government is so powerful. And you know what? The reason why government is so powerful is because you and I gave them the power. Now, I know this comes from many years ago, and even probably our great-grandparents, they were the ones who started giving the government all this control and all this power so that they can just do whatever they want. Now, let me start off by just sharing with you what a government is really supposed to do. And it's going to shock you maybe a little bit if you don't know. There are only two things that a government is supposed to look after, and that's the safety of the citizens, and they have to enforce the laws. In other words, they have to remove the criminal elements from the streets so that you and I can have a safe environment to live in. Those are the only two requirements, according to Scripture, according to the Bible, that God instituted that a government should have. Now, why is that? Why did we give so much control over to the government? I don't really know. But I think there's a lot of religious stuff around that as well. Because if we look at most of the cities and most of the towns in the world, whether it's the United States, whether it's Europe, whether it's many African countries, then it's the churches that started these cities or started these towns. But you know what happened? After a little while, the church decided, I don't want to have anything to do with the day-to-day running of this town anymore, or this city, and they gave it over to the civil authorities. So there they started giving their power and their authority and their control over to civil institutions that did not have the people's best interest at heart. That's really where it comes from. And I really believe there's a shadow government. That's why I'm talking about a shadow government, because like you will or might have noticed anyhow, is that it doesn't matter where in the world you are. The rules and the regulations nowadays are very similar. And I specifically saw that during the times when the lockdowns and everything were there, from one country to the next, the fines were the same. Everything was so similar. So who controlled these things? I do not let anyone tell me that these governments, that they corroborated and that the one in Africa decided the fines that they're going to levy on the people if they disobey the government is going to be exactly the same as in the United States. It just doesn't work like that. So there must be some organization or some shadow government that's behind all this. Now, why am I talking about this? Because you and I need to realize that you and I have a part to play in everything. And especially in today's day. The reason why you and I have been oppressed for so many years, even our children, and if you and I don't do anything, our future generations, and even as we grow older, then we're going to be even more oppressed. Now, I'm not against government, not at all. We need a government, like I said, for those two reasons. To look after our safety and to enforce the laws of the country. That's the only two things. Hospitals, not supposed to be controlled by the government. Education, not supposed to be controlled by the government. All those things need to be controlled by the citizens and really by the churches. The churches are supposed to look after the people's well-being so that the people can be healthy and that the people can be strong. Even social security. It is not the government priority. They're not supposed to be involved in that. That's why there's so much abuse. And that's why there are so many people that are not really looked after, because it's too easy. People just go and stand and they just collect, and the government just hands out. Willy-nilly they give to people, and it's not supposed to be like that. Whereas if you're in a community and you look after your own community, then you're quickly going to see who are the guys who are not doing what they're supposed to do. Isn't that true? So anyhow, so why am I telling you this? Early this morning when I woke up, I was just thinking, and all of a sudden I thought of this name. Now, I've never, as far as I know, heard this name. But when I went and I started digging a little bit deeper, it's like a fictional name in a book. So it's a fictional character. Now the name is, I'm just going to check it. It's and I'll put it on the screen for you as well. It's Moriarty. That is the name. Now apparently this was a professor, I think, Moriarty. And this fictional character was created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who penned the series Sherlock Holmes. It was like a detective series, and he also had this other character. Now, this Professor Moriarty, he was a shady character. He was actually a criminal in disguise, and everything that Sherlock Holmes did, this guy was basically responsible for. But he was in the background. He was sort of like this shadow character. So he would provide information to the criminals and guide them in what they need to do. And when the criminal would be caught, he was nowhere to be found. So there was no strings attached to him. And that's why it was so interesting to me. I've been thinking and meditating on this thing for a long time. And I'm not very happy about it, because you and I need to do something about it. Because if the good people, if we don't stand up and do what we're supposed to do and get involved in government and in local government, then it is not a good thing. Because then we just hand it over to someone else and we say, listen, I just want to have a comfortable life. But you know what? You and I don't have a comfortable life anymore, because we just have relinquished our authority and our power over to a group that are just sitting there and they're just collecting, and they're getting fatter and fatter, so to speak, and they're getting more and more control. Now, it sounds as if it's a little bit of a rant, but maybe it is, but it's also a call to action for you and I. Not to take up physical arms, that's not what I'm saying, but you and I need to do what we need to do. Now, where I get this also from, there's a word that is in the Greek language as well, and I think the Romans also used it, and it's the word ecclesia. Now, what that means, it is a collective governmental structure, and all the people in that city, mostly the males, they were involved in this governmental structure in this society. And they also had specific rules of who the people were that could be part of this ecclesia. And those were people that did military service. In other words, they proved that they love the country and that they will stand up for their country and fight for their country and for their people's well-being. Because that's really what the armed forces do and what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to look after our well-being, again, on the government side, so that you and I can have a safe environment in which we can live and raise our children, and so that our children can have their children as well. So that is really what it is. And most people do not understand this. They don't understand. Many people don't even know about an ecclesia. If people are Christians, under the Christian faith, believers, then they've heard this term ecclesia, because Jesus used this term of the ecclesia. And what he basically said, my church or my ecclesia, is actually the word that he used there. And we think of a church as just this building a few believers that just get together once a week or a few times a week. But that's not what he meant. This ecclesia is a governing body. And that is what you and I are supposed to be. We are supposed to be involved in the legislation and also in the day-to-day running actually of our cities, of our towns, or of our communities. And that's why I'm sharing these things with you, because there is the shadow government and the shady character that really just, we think it's a fictional character, but it's not. They are very, very real, and nobody knows about them. Now, there are different names, different people relate to this group of people. I'm not going to get into that, but all I want you to understand today is that you and I need to do something. And this guy, he's even been described as Professor Moriarty. He was like the Napoleon of crime. He was very bright in this story, and he was almost just as clever and as wise as Sherlock Holmes, the detective. And apparently why, this is just for interest's sake, the reason why Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, why he created this character, because he actually wanted Sherlock Holmes in the story to die, because he didn't want to go on with this series anymore. And apparently it was very, very successful, and the people really loved it. Now, I'm talking in the 1890s, so it's many, many years ago, over a century ago. But that's really why he created this character. But it seems to me, even today, this idea is still there, and I think it's always been there. And then I just want to mention one person to you, which I think you and I should really take note of, and his name is Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, Gramsci. And the reason why I'm saying that is because his influence, he also lived just after the turn of the previous century, in the early 1900s. He lived in Italy, and he was part of the Communist Party. And when Mussolini took over, he threw him in jail. And the last number of years, this Antonio Gramsci, he was in jail, and that's where he really perfected all these socialist and communist, call it manifestos. So he took the stuff from Marx and from Lenin, and he changed that, because he said, no, we cannot go and shed a lot of blood. The people don't like that. We cannot take everything over by force, because that was really Marx's agenda, to take over the industry, and so also then take over the economy of a country, but take it by force. So there was lots of bloodshed usually when that happened. And this guy said, no, we're going to go through the institutions. We're going to go through the schools. We're going to go through the universities. We're going to change the people's culture. We're going to tell the people that they don't have any cultures anymore. And I can tell you a whole bunch of stuff on that, because I've really done a lot of study on that and a lot of research, because it's so important. It impacts us so deeply today, because since the early 60s, some of these guys who really studied Gramsci's teachings, they started becoming into government, and many countries, their governments really started falling apart. Actually, the people started falling apart, and the government started getting stronger. So one of the things that they say is that the whole thing about Gramsci, he was now on a softer tone, if I can call it that. So the whole communist or socialist ideology is, in short, still to control the industry and then the capital of that specific country. And we know, like it is today, they want to control the entire world. And what they really endeavoring to do is to liberate, as they call it, the working class. So everybody is equal, and yes, everybody is equal. But if you don't work, and if you don't build a proper enterprise, then you cannot expect to have the same as someone else who really works hard and his whole family is working together. So that's basically the premise. So if you don't agree with me, just stay with me, because this thing just about equal rights, yes, we have all have to have equal rights. We all have to have everything. Basically, we have it, but you and I have got a decision whether we receive it or whether we accept it or not. That's really where it comes from. So it's not the government that hands it over, because when the government just hands it over to you and I, that is when control takes place. And it doesn't even only have to have government. Just think for it. I'm just going to use this example. If someone comes to you, for example, and they say, Pete, I want advice on such and such. And obviously you want to help this person, so you help this person. And the next time he thinks, you know what, I need some help. Let me go back to Pete again. And he says, Pete, I need help with this now. And you, being the nice person that you are, you say, yes, this is how you do this. And eventually this person becomes too lazy to go and do research on his own, and he comes to Pete all the time. And that is immediately how you form the structure of control. Now that person looks at you, and if you don't provide the information to this person, then you become the bad person. Now that guy doesn't want to help me anymore. Do you understand? That's on a very, very simple basis how some of these hierarchies start forming and developing. And with communism, that's really what they want to do. They want to control the economies. And even if you look today, these massive enterprises, many of them are owned by single companies. I'm not going to mention names here today, but you can go and do a little bit research for yourself. And that's what they then do. They control everything. And that through that, wars and all kinds of stuff are being stirred up. And that's why it's so important for you and I that we really take up our responsibility and do what you and I have been called for, what we've been born for, and what our purpose in life is. And the last thing that I'm going to share with you is how these people operate. And you would have seen that when people, for example, on a university campus, many times these young people, they're so stirred up with the socialist ideology and the socialist ideas. So when someone comes, whether you're righteous and you're 100% correct, they brand you as an outsider. What they basically say, they want to put suspicion on you. They want people to think, but this person is a suspicious person. You can't just believe what this person is doing. And many times they shout and they spit on you, and that's how they operate. So it's just the opposite. They say we're social, we have to be friendly with each other, but that's not what they do normally. And that's not how it operates. And that's the sad thing about it. And when you do that and you stand up for something that is right, then they brand you and say, yeah, but this guy must be a part of the ruling party. He just wants to oppress everyone else. And it's very, very far from the truth. So the reason why I'm sharing these last few things with you is so that you can just open your eyes and just see what's going on around us. But there's a massive shift, especially in the United States now, with a recent presidential election. And this is spreading all across the world. And it's a very, very good thing. But you and I will have to take our responsibility and get involved in government, in the governmental structures. And it's the reason why we don't get involved in that is because we don't know what to do. And we think, oh no, that's this daunting thing. I have to have all these qualifications or whatever. No, it's not. When you go and look now, sometimes it's even mothers that go into the schools and say, enough is enough. And you and I can do the same. So there I've given you quite a bit of food for thought as far as shadow governments are concerned and how to keep them out of your cookie jar because they don't belong in your cookie jar. no one's cookie jar. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you in the next show. Have an awesome day.